So welcome everyone to our third and final day of dtcser and the structure of compelling suggestions. How are we doing, first of all? Everyone good? Give me some thumbs up, for me some yeses into the text box if you are rocking and rolling. Excellent, beautiful, excellent. So before we dive into content today, I thought I'd throw the lines open if there's any questions on anything we covered so far. Now's a good time to bring it up. Either type a Q into the chat room or just type in your question directly. Or if you want to raise your hand, we'll come up and have a quick chat about it. I want to make sure that you have clarity about what we've been covering, right? So whilst you're thinking about that, let me just sort of summarize the salient points. Number one, in order to measure the effectiveness of a suggestion, we're thinking in terms of change, or in the Ericksonian world, the idea of creating something, a learning of some kind. Learnings come from experiences, plus the filters, the perceptions we have about those learnings. So whenever we can create a learning of some kind, we've caused change to some degree. It's just a question of what kind of learning will create the appropriate change. How does this relate to hypnosis? Well, we're looking to create internal harmony in the person that tends to deepen the experience. And we do that through essentially truth, right? We can say things that are specifically true and things that are generally true. When we're talking about things that are specifically true, we're talking about things you can test with your senses, right? So things you can see, hear, feel, and so on. When we talk about things that are generally true, it could be your senses, but could also be concepts like love and happiness and learnings and understandings and so on, right? How do we use these things? Well, we've got the construction of pacing and leading. Pacing is pretty much exclusively focused around your senses. Notice that you are having this experience. Whenever you can get someone to notice they're having an experience, you start activating the confirmation bias. So they start agreeing with the things that you're saying. They're saying, yes, this is absolutely true. Leading statements are essentially concepts or nominalizations, right? This is basically saying to the unconscious mind, please have this experience, have this outcome right now. Please have a learning. Please have happiness. Please generate a feeling of some kind. Do you get the idea? Now, yesterday, we started to do something a little bit different with leading statements. So as well as saying, look, this is the experience you're having right now, and saying, here's another experience you could have instead, right? Which is the leading statements. We created a kind of bridge between the two. Does that concept say anything to anyone? Anyone have any idea what I'm talking about here? Right? You've all done it, but I want you to now recognize this. All right, as you're close, the association is part of it. So look, when we talk about pacing statements, we're talking about a very specific verb. The verb is pay attention to this experience. You with me so far? Everyone with me so far? Just give me a thumbs up just so that we are on the same page. Good. When we're saying about leading statements, we're specifically talking about nouns. In other words, they're abstract nouns, but they're still nouns. Happiness, love, power, and so on. These are technically nouns. Are you with me so far as well? Right? The thing that connects the two are verbs, right? In other words, we're getting the unconscious mind to do a process to get to that noun, to get to that outcome. If our outcome is happiness, right? There is a process we engage in to get happiness. What might someone do to become happier? Well, you might recall a happy memory, right? The happy memory is a noun, but the act of recalling it is a verb. It's an activity you go into. Does that make sense? You might anticipate a positive future, right? That's different than recalling a happy memory from the past, but both will create a form of happiness. Does that make sense to you guys? So anticipation and recalling something, both give you a method, a means for achieving the ultimate outcome, in this case, happiness. Does this idea make sense to you? Right? Now, you could get away with just normalizations. you know, experience this, experience this, experience this, and now experience happiness, right? And technically, we're hijacking the verb from the pacing statements, the verb being experience or notice or feel, etc. Right? So Harry, so instead of changing states from static movement and action, I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. What we're really doing is we're not denormalizing, we're not taking the noun and breaking it down. We're just adding movement to the noun by giving you a method to get to it, right? So here's a question, and feel free to do a little bit of brainstorming on this. What are all the things we could ask the unconscious mind to do, right? The one we've been most focused on is notice something in some form. In other words, when they see something, they notice it. When they hear something, they notice it. When they feel something, they notice it. Are you with me so far? Yes? But is that the only thing we can get the unconscious mind to do? What other things can we ask it to do? We can ask it to recall something, review something, remove something, add something. We could ask it to protect something, heal something, dream something, change something, choose something, build something, prepare something, bring things together, split them apart, explore something, test something, simulate something, delay something, access something, apply something, anticipate, learn, store, improve. Can you see that there is a long list of things that we could ask the unconscious mind to do? Are you guys with me so far? We call or at least I like to call these suggestions process suggestions. They give you the process. So now we have a really simple formula for compelling suggestions. What is it? Pace something, in other words, notice. Process something, recall. Achieve something, happiness. Feel the sensation of your breathing. Let it remind you of a happy memory. Feel the happiness it brings. Do you see how we're doing this? And what we're doing here is we're making it easier for suggestions to become true. Because if I just say, notice your breathing, notice happiness, right? It can work, but it's a bigger leap to go from one to the other. Are you with me? So I want to explore this in a slightly unusual way today. Do you remember yesterday? The last thing that we did, we created a technique, if you will, where we used a personal trance experience in order to resolve a seemingly unrelated problem. Do you remember that method? Yes? How can a memory that's completely unrelated to the problem help you to resolve the problem? What do you think is going on there, folks? Movement of our states? Yes. Hidden talents? Yes, you're very close there, Nate. Right? Keep going, folks. Nate's the closest one. Provides a resource. Exactly. Nate and Peter are right on the money here. Anyone for any more? Simulate the method or copy and paste. Yes, yes, yes. Very good. Patterns. Yes. Right? Same skills needed. Jay, you've nailed it, right? Attach the positive emotions. That'd be one possibility. Yes. Which goes back to the resource and so on. Applies a learning, creates an association. Okay. You guys are on the right track here. Perfect. Essentially what we've done is we've turned the personal trance experience into a metaphor. It's a metaphor for the solution needed in the problem scenario. Does that kind of make sense to you guys? That's why all of you are correct. The metaphor contains a pattern. The metaphor is something that you can you've associated the resources to. The metaphor is basically a little encyclopedia of learnings that you can apply somewhere else. The metaphor is a demonstration of hidden talent in action. But ultimately, the metaphor contains the process that you can then, as someone said here a moment ago, copy and paste into the problem scenario so that the problem scenario starts becoming easier or better. Is this making sense to you guys? Are you with me so far? We add to the client story the value of a hero. That's exactly where we're going with this, right? So what I want to do this morning, I'd like to go through a bunch of like fun, fast exercises to get our metaphor brains activated, and then show you how that fits inside of a hypnotic process. Would that be of value to you guys? Would you be interested in that? Yes? So the very first thing we want to do is a real simple metaphor game, right? Can I just have a quick volunteer just so I can demonstrate it? Right? You'll do the easy part. I'll do the hard part, I promise you. Or maybe I'll do the hard part. You'll do the easy part. I don't know. Craig, come on up. Let's bring Craig forward. Okay, Craig. So go ahead and unmute yourself. Good morning. Yep. How are you?
Morning. I'm good.
Excellent. So the game is super easy. We're basically priming your mind for creating metaphors, and we're going to start playing around with this with other people, of course, right? Sure. So I'm going to ask you a simple question and then just see whatever metaphor comes up that fits right? Mm-hmm. I'd like for you to think about moments when you've been at your best. You got something like that in mind?
Yeah.
When you're at your best, you are like what?
A grounded tree.
A grounded tree. And what kind of tree is a tree that's grounded like this?
A tree that can weather storms or bloom in the sun.
And when a tree can weather storms and bloom in the sun and is grounded, what kind of grounded is a tree like this?
It's very deeply rooted and easily able to get nourishment.
And deeply rooted and able to get nourishment. Okay, time out. Super simple, isn't it? Right? We've turned the abstract idea, being at your best, into a metaphor that now encapsulates that idea. What we do with it will come later, but for now, let's just play around with that. Was that easy to do, Craig?
Yeah, really easy.
Perfect. All right, let's release Craig back to wilderness. And let's get the groups of 3 together, please. There we go. All right, so you'll have just 2 minutes each, 7 minutes in total to do this. The question's super simple. It's ask them, when you're at your best, you're like what? Remember, we're looking specifically for a metaphor. And when they give you the answer, then you ask what kind of tree, what kind of grounded, what kind of thing is that? And just go 2 or 3 rounds to get a richer description, not just a grounded tree, but a grounded tree with deep roots that get nourishment and that can weather any storm and can thrive in the sun. That paints a beautiful little picture for the whole scene. Does that make sense? All right, Elizabeth, take us away. Some reports. If and when you're back, please go ahead and give me some reports, folks. How was that? And I think we've got everyone back now. So welcome back, everyone. How was that? Was that interesting? Was that fun? Really lots of fun, so much fun, perfect. That's exactly what we're looking for, right? So generating metaphors is fun. It's easy. All you need is a content to metaphorize, right? Let's do another version of that just to make sure we are on the same page. And I'm going to show you a really cool trick that we can do with this. So let's make this into something a bit more purposeful, right? When hypnosis has worked for you, you are like, what, right? And then what kind of that, right? So same structure, same question, same process of getting a metaphor. We're now making the metaphor more targeted, which is when hypnosis works for you. Harry has a quick question. So Peter has a quick question. Is that right? Oh, no. Okay, fine. All right, folks. Unless there's any questions, off you go with your partners. Play around with it. All righty, folks. If you're back already, please go ahead and paste your comments. Come on back, folks. Please go ahead and start typing up some comments. How was that? And I think here we are with everyone. Perfect. So how was that, folks? Welcome back. Was that fun? Was it great for Marco? Is he the only person enjoying that one? You're really going to leave him all on his own with that comment? Interesting for Chris. All right. Smooth. There we go. Very interesting. Now we're getting some action going on. All right, folks. So let's have a metaphors are grooving. They are, absolutely. Let me get someone to come up here for a quick discussion because we're about to switch types of metaphor. And I'd like you to have a sense of why we're doing it. So who'd like to come up, have a quick chat with me? And in some respects, I promise to reveal the secrets behind the compelling suggestions that have formulated this entire seminar. Jay, come on up. Let's see if I can live up to my promise here now. How's it going, Jay?
Good. A little tired.
Excellent. Well, we'll see if we can wake those brain cells up a bit.
Good.
So the game we just played is to evoke a metaphor. Nice and simple, fun, interesting, right?
Yeah.
We're about to change to another exercise. In this one, we're going to present a metaphor. The question now is going to be, and you can do this in a group if you like, as a group discussion if you like, or you can do this one-to-one again, is how is healing an injury or an illness a bit like building a house? Now notice, something's changed now. This is different to what we did in the previous exercise, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
What's changed?
Well, you're introducing something and you're
Exactly.
need to make a connection.
Exactly. And so in the previous version, right, is technically an educational process. I'm drawing something out of you. In this one, it's technically an indoctrinational process. I'm putting something into you. I'm giving you the answer. You now have to find what the answer is. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Right. Now, why is that the secret to a compelling suggestion? What do you think I mean by that?
Because it gets this subconscious brain and the other person solving a problem.
Exactly. This is the exercise you're about to do is no different to having Joshua up here looking for answers to Brown in his memory of shooting. It's saying there is an answer here, find it. If the unconscious mind accepts that presupposition, it'll go and find it and it'll make miracles happen. If it does not, it rejects it. And now we are into critical factor and resistance and all those other wonderful things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Any questions or comments on that?
No, it made me think of a client and I have a question relative to that. Sometimes I tell metaphor. Could I ask that question after I tell a metaphor relative to their problem?
You can, but it depends on how you want the metaphor to work, right? So the way Erickson would work is he would specifically tell metaphors so the conscious mind has no way of drawing an analogy to it, right? In fact, he would sometimes go out of his way to throw in completely random stories to confuse the conscious mind's ability to figure it out, right? On the other side, getting them to actually engage in the metaphor and either invest in it and start searching for it can be very productive. It's essentially what you're doing in the DMI. Think about it. When you do the DMI in the CHPH, right? You got a symbol. I wonder what it means. That's exactly what you're doing. You're saying the symbol has the answer. Go find it. You get the idea? So if you do the same thing with a metaphor that you're giving to someone, they are more likely to have the same sort of experience as a DMI. I'll show you how we apply this later on. For now, I just want you to get the skill to see that there's a difference between evoking and invoking a metaphor, right? And how, well, we'll talk more about it in the next round. Maybe it'll come up after the next round as well, because there's a few more nuances we might add to that. But I think we've said enough for the time being. Sound fair enough?
Fantastic.
Let's release Jay back to the wilderness. Exercise is super simple. You really just asking the question, it's a script, right? It's a really short script. So ask the question and then see how, I don't know how you do this as a group discussion, see how it changes how your thinking works. Just notice what it does to you when the question gets flawed for everyone to engage with. We'll come back, have a chat about that, and then we'll start making it practical. All right, folks, this one's gonna be a little bit shorter. We'll just take Just take 5 minutes, 5 minutes in total. So you'll have a group discussion. Elizabeth, take us away. Manu is a shadowed one again. All right, if you're back, please go ahead and start posting some comments. Jay, maybe you'll raise your hand so we can get ready to just bring you forward as we wait for the others to come back. There you go, that's perfect. Okay, folks, Elizabeth, if you can just pin us, it's perfect. In the meantime, feel free to start adding your comments, folks. How was that? So Jay, how was that for you?
Good. It was easy. We've done this in another class. I don't remember which class we did this in.
I'm sure we have, because we're basically teaching the same concepts. This is going to be either an Ericksonian class or something like conversational hypnosis mastery or something in that vein, right?
Yeah.
Because within this, we have the key elements for how suggestions work, right? How did this one feel different to the previous one?
Well, in some ways, had to think a little bit harder. It's like, all right, what is the connection between these two?
Yes. Why do you have to think harder? Or should I say, who has to think harder?
Well, I have to think harder.
Which part of you?
The subconscious.
So in the previous exercise, that one actually was more subconscious, because what you're doing is you're taking an experience you already have.
Oh, right. It's my conscious making the connection on these.
Yes, that's why it's harder, right?
Yeah.
The effort you're currently putting in is a sign that you're trying to make the connection consciously, and you're straining essentially to make an unconscious connection so you can see through it. As soon as you connect your unconscious, you'll instantly see it. You're like, oh, I've got it.
Right.
Insight means you've plugged into the connection, the unconscious. Is that kind of making sense?
Yeah, it's like finding the right door. There's several doors. So you got to find the right door.
Yes. This also explains why some suggestions work with some people and fail with others, because some people will struggle consciously to do it. Others just instantly will have a flash of experience and go, oh, this is what it is. And they don't question it because they're having the experience. And as we know, experience is the measure of truth, at least for the unconscious. Do you see where we're going with this?
Yep.
Right? Questions or comments on that so far?
No, that makes total sense.
Right? So we've been pacing, which is actually very easy. We're drawing things out of the unconscious. Leading is something we've got to be more careful about, because if we lead too fast, now this exercise is an example of leading too fast. What happens when you lead too fast? You invite the conscious mind in to mess with things, which is harder, right? Now, some people will still struggle through it and eventually break through. Others will just say, well, I don't get this, and bow out. That's called resistance. That's actually just us miscommunicating, right? And other times, the critical factor just kick in and says, it isn't. It'll reject it out of hand, in which case we call it a critical factor, another kind of resistance. But that really is, once again, the unconscious mind refusing to play ball. Instead of accommodating the elephant, it rejects the elephant. It's become untrue. Can you feel that sort of happening within? So you're on the verge of those different energies, shall we say, whilst you're doing the exercise? Yep. Perfect. Any questions on it so far? Because we're going to go back and do another version of this. So we'll do a few more rounds of this. And I want you to notice under what conditions is it less hard?
Okay.
All right, just think about that terms. For now, the next exercise is going to be the same concept, but this time we're going to change the content. How is overcoming a fear like a bird learning to fly? How is overcoming fear like a bird learning to fly? Play that with your groups. We'll come back, have another chat, and then we will gradually get into something practical with this. All right, let's release Jay back to wilderness, and everyone has 5 minutes. Elizabeth, when you're ready, take us away. if and when you're back, go ahead and throw your comments up. Jay, if you are willing to participate one more time, come on up. We'll do one more round and then we'll get into practical stuff. Let's bring Jay forward, please. And everyone else, please go ahead and start typing your experiences. Okay, folks, how was that? Was that interesting? Was that fun? Easier this time? Jay, did you find it easy as well, like Nate and Barbara did?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what made it easier this time?
What made it easier? I don't know. For me, I just imagined I was the bird.
Thank you. Actually, you've gone the other direction. Let's try the other version now, right? So something about you went through a process. So in other words, when we went at the leading metaphor, cold, it was hard work. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Now you went through a process. What was the process? You imagined you were the bird, and then thereby you could retrofit the idea of overcoming fear more easily. Correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now let's see if we can do the opposite as well, right? Because what you were doing basically is you're thinking from the end state is really what we're doing, right? I'm already the bird, so then where does fear come into my equation? And that makes it easier to answer, right?
Yeah.
So let's see if we can turn it around. The next question is going to be, how is becoming a confident hypnotist like an artist learning to paint? So what I'm going to invite you to do on this one, I don't want you to think about being an artist. I actually want you to think about being a confident hypnotist, right? So put yourself in the shoes of whatever you think is a confident hypnotist. And everyone else, whilst you're listening to this, right? I'm not talking to Jay, all of you, I encourage you right now, just think about, do you guys want to be a confident hypnotist? Just throw me a Y in the text box. I can't see most of the videos right now. So throw me a Y if you want to be a confident hypnotist, right? Now, Jay, do you want to be a confident hypnotist?
Yes.
Perfect. Now, how do you know? The only way you can know you want to be a confident hypnotist is because somewhere in your mind, you've got a representation of it and you say, that's what I want. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I want to have the impact.
Right. So you may or may not know consciously what a confident hypnotist is yet, but here's the key. As soon as you connect your mind to what a confident hypnotist is, metaphors start becoming easy. So hopefully this round should become the easiest for you to answer. As long as you can put yourself into the mindset of, if I was a confident hypnotist, right? This is how I would be. As soon as you can connect to that idea, I will guarantee that answering the question about an artist learning to paint will become ridiculously easy. Is that experiment worth trying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So everyone, I'm going to waffle for you a few more minutes because I'm going to give you a real chance to really think about what does being a confident hypnotist mean to you. Really get yourself in that mindset. Think about your experiences, think about what you've seen, think about your hopes, about your dreams, about your fantasies, put them all together into one big mishmash internal vision board. And when you have that, then Elizabeth, please take us away for the final round of this exercise. Please go ahead and start typing up your experiences. Meanwhile, Jay, if you would mind raising your hand again, we can complete the cycle this way. Okay, folks, welcome back. How was that? Was that interesting? Great fits? Yes, powerful? Perfect. Okay, Jay, what have you noticed?
Yeah, I mean, there was so many easy similarities to draw between the two. Right. We started and did kind of the question that you asked as confident hypnotist, and then we brought it to the full question of how that's like.
Perfect. Now let's analyze. We've done the exact same exercise 3 times, right? All 3 were leading exercises, right? The first time was hard. The second time was easier. The third time was easier-est. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah.
What's happening? Same exercise.
I don't know. It's like the subconscious is taking over more so.
You created conditions in which the subconscious answers the question, not the conscious. When you try to answer the question consciously, it was difficult. The more you involve the unconscious, the easier it became. What does this have to do with pacing and leading?
Well, if you don't pace properly, you're not going to allow the space for this to occur. And if you pace properly, then you create the conditions that are ripe for this.
Right. So why do we pace?
To lead them right into that.
We pace to get the unconscious mind to play.
Yeah.
When the unconscious mind is playing, you can lead them anywhere. The more it's engaged, the more it's playing, the bigger your leads can be, right?
Yeah.
This was a genius of Erickson. He got the unconscious mind to play. He had lots of tricks, right? He had riddles and puzzles and scaring the the bejesus out of people. Lots of ways he would do that. Yeah. But ultimately, at the heart of it all, if you engage the unconscious, then it's easy. Getting weird and ridiculous over-the-top reactions is easy. If you don't engage the unconscious, getting little tiny successes, you're going to have to claw for it tooth and nail. Do you see how that works?
Yeah, it just gave me an idea that I could give them a very simple one and then lead them into a more difficult one if I wanted to do that, but almost like using it as priming. Give them a ridiculous simple thing.
That is exactly what it is, right? Priming is how you get the unconscious mind to play. That's how you format the unconscious. I wouldn't say all, that's an exaggeration. One of the key strategies of Ericksonian metaphors, how Erickson told stories, was priming. He would tell story after story after story after story with the same theme in it. He wouldn't tell you what the theme was, right? And if your conscious mind started figuring out what it was, he'd throw in some random stories that were completely irrelevant to confuse the conscious mind, and to go back, as soon as he saw the conscious mind going like, what's that? Then he'd go back to telling priming stories, right? Because it's the unconscious we want, and you can experience it for yourself now, right? When the unconscious is in action, it's all easy. When it's not, when it's inactive, it's all hard, right? And how do we know if it's easy or hard? You watch them, right? What's going to cause harmony? When the unconscious mind is answering the question, or when the conscious mind is answering the question?
Unconscious.
Are you beginning to see it? The matrix?
Yeah, the matrix.
So I'd like to, if you're okay with this, I'd like to actually do an exercise now, which you'll all do in a moment as well, but I'd like to demonstrate with you if that's okay with you.
Sure, yeah.
So we want to take what we just learned and see if we can start applying it, right? There are two ways to get a metaphor. We've already just established this, right? In other words, I can draw the metaphor out of you, or I can give you a metaphor and somehow plug you into the metaphor so that you're finding it. Does that make sense? If you're going to do this style of hypnosis, which is not as interactive as like the conversational hypnotherapy training is, the conversational hypnotherapy is more interactive, specifically so you can get more feedback points and correct yourself as you go along, right? It's not the only way of doing hypnosis though, right? I'd like to show you a method of doing that so that when you create a metaphor, just because it pleases you, just because it fits, that's your unconscious mind told you, use this one, it's a good one, that it's going to be really, really, really likely that your subjects will connect to it the way you just connected to the last metaphor. Would you like to experience how that works?
Yes.
All right. We'll do it first, then we'll talk about it, then you can go off and do it in your groups. Okay. So, are there any sticking points or limitations or concerns you have when it comes to practicing hypnosis? Anything you'd like to overcome on your journey to being a great hypnotist?
Yeah, sometimes I get stuck in the process of perfection of the process versus more a flow state.
Okay, so what does that mean, perfecting the process versus flow state?
Means I'm trying to be too rigid on a script.
Got it. Right. And how do you know it's a problem?
Because it takes me a long time and I get confused on the script versus sometimes when I just use intuition. Like NLP is a good example. When I learned NLP, I got stuck in that. And then when I just intuitively did it with clients, then it was super easy.
Got it. So, and correct me if I'm wrong here, it sounds like what you're saying is missing is the idea of flow and intuition. Is that correct?
Yes.
Anything else missing?
No, I think that's the key.
So where do you want to be instead?
What do I want to be instead?
Yeah.
I want to be in flow and ease.
Okay. And how do you know when you're in ease, when you're in flow like that?
I don't feel any cognitive struggle. It's just
what do you feel?
I feel like I'm just telling a story or with friends or
right. So what do you notice is different about you when you feel like you're just telling a story or just with friends and you're flowing like this?
It's happening naturally.
It's happening naturally?
Yeah.
Right? And what is actually different about you when it's happening naturally like this?
I don't have to be in my head or cognitive or overly cognitive about it. So it yeah.
Okay. And who's someone who knows you really well?
My kids.
Your kids. What would your kids notice was different about you when you're not in your head like this, when you're just flowing and
I think that they'd see me enjoy more.
Right? How do they know you're enjoying it more?
I think there's probably a charm or a charisma they see in that, a smile and an energy, kind of more connected to spirit.
All right. Have you ever come across the idea of improv theater?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Being in flow as a hypnotist is exactly like being a great improv actor. You know what I mean, right? Did you have to think about it?
No, because I've done some improv.
Right? That's not the only reason, right? So let's talk a little about what we just did here. We're just basically eliciting a process metaphor. I'm trying to generate a process metaphor that'll fit you, right? So how do we go through that process? Well, we've got two things to talk about. Parameters, problem, outcome, right? We'll start with the problem just to define where we're at, right? And then we want to go towards a solution metaphor. So we need to have some kind of solution. When we talk about the problem, where does that leave your mind?
In the
problem. Yeah, in the problem, right? So you think about the problem, and that's the reality that you're in. And from that place, it's much more difficult to connect to the solution metaphor, shall we say, right? So we need to talk about the problem first, so we have a sense of where it's at. Then we need to talk about the solution that the person wants, so you can get a sense of that. But more importantly, once they're in that solution frame, they will find the answer they're looking for in your metaphor, right? No different to what you did in the last exercise, right? What did you do before thinking about a painter? You put yourself in the shoes of a great hypnotist, of a confident hypnotist. And it was easy to do then, right? So how do we do that with a client? Well, it sounds like we're just doing normal, therapy stuff. Oh, tell me about your problem. Where's your problem? Let me tell you about your mother or whatever Freudian thing you want to go for, right? But if we just talk about the problem, we're creating a bigger divide between them and the solution, right? So at some point, we've got to spend time talking about the solution. How do you know? How do you want to be? How you be different? Will you notice what difference will be there, right? The more I see you in harmony around that, right? The more I'll know that almost any metaphor I give you will be easy for you to connect to. More importantly, as you're talking, it forms a picture in my mind. First started the idea of like a tennis player, and I could have used that as well, by the way, right? But then as you talked about flow and being in the moment and being connected to spirit and so on, I thought, you know what? That sounds a lot more like improv, right? To me, it just sounds like improv, right? And I've seen good improv actors and I've seen bad improv actors. In fact, I've been a bad improv actor, And so when I present you the metaphor, now you instantly recognize it. That's where you want your clients to be, your subjects to be, when we actually apply them in a hypnotic context. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any questions about that?
No. So
do we have the exercise up, please? So just let's go through this very quickly, just so you have it, so everyone has it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask everyone else as well, and Jay, of course, there as well, right? We're going to basically look for any sticking points in hypnosis. We're looking specifically to fix a problem, right? And then we've asked, where are you now? What's the problem? Where are you stuck? How do you know it's a problem, right? The transition question is, what's missing for you? Why is that a transition question?
Well, what's missing kind of really is what's the problem?
Yeah, so
you
it sounds like a problem, but it's actually asking about the solution, isn't it?
Right. It's what's the problem, but it's also like, how's that? That's giving the pathway for a process.
Yes, it's the bridge. What's missing for you is the bridge between the problem and the solution.
Right.
You get it? Yep. Right? When someone's in problem state of mind, they like focusing on problems. So if you ask them what's missing, or they'll go, oh, yeah, I recognize that's part of the problem. What they're not realizing is that when they answer the question properly, they've just started the first breadcrumb trail of connection to the solution, right?
Yeah.
And then you ask, what do you want to be? So how do you want to be? How do you want to be different? Whatever variation you like. The key one is, how would you know you've solved it? How would you know you've done that? You're there, right? And then specifically, notice in language. What do you notice is different? Does that remind you of something? What do you notice is different?
It's the awareness questions.
Right. What can you see is different? And any of the awareness questions fit here. What would you see? What could you hear? What would you feel? What would you observe? What would others observe? Right? So these are the same awareness questions we started with on day one, but now this is in a way covert hypnosis, because you are now becoming the flow hypnotist in order to answer that question. Meanwhile, the questions are just things for you to keep talking, so I have something to listen to, and that listening process, if I'm relatively relaxed, just sparks an idea in my mind. It says, oh, that sounds like this, right? We humans do it all the time. So I'll present my analogy, my metaphor, and say, I have a sense it's a bit like this, right? If you go like, yes, right? Then I know that both you are in the right state of mind, unconsciously, unconscious mind is playing, and I know my metaphor has struck gold. Super simple, isn't it?
Yep.
Once you can do this more overtly like this, then after the break, we'll talk about how we do this inside of a actual hypnotic process. Any questions about that?
No, seems pretty good.
Harry, if they say, I don't know, I'm presuming you're talking about, if they say, I don't know about, if they say, I don't know about how they want to be different, then that is the fundamental question they've got to answer in order, if they don't know what's missing, well then, they can't know it's a problem unless they know what's missing at some level, right? There's a complete picture in there. What they may not know how to do is how to articulate it. So our job is to ask the question as in as many different ways as possible, right? If they can't answer what's missing, ask them how they want to be instead. If they can't answer how they want to be instead, ask them, what would someone else notice was different about you when you solved it? If they can't answer that, ask them, how would someone else solve it? So you're basically, you keep digging until they can answer the question of where do you want to be in some form or fashion. And once they've answered it, just like the tree, you find details. You get the roots, you get the storms, you get the sunshine. So you have details around that little piece that they've given you. Does that make sense, Jay and Harry? All right, folks, so let's take let's take 3 minutes each, so 10 minutes in total to do that in your groups. Elizabeth, when you're ready, take us away. Hey, folks, if you're back, please go ahead and post results, comments, experiences.
Yeah.
Okay, folks, welcome back. How was that? Was that fun? Interesting? Are you starting to see the hypno matrix unfold before you? Right? Only Stephen had a lot of fun. Is that the only person who had fun in this one? Any insights you want to share? Any discoveries? Any connections that are made? And more importantly, any questions you want to ask? Chris saying it's revealing in a strange way. That's exactly what it feels like when we are connecting with the unconscious. This one could have been longer to have more fun. Hey, you have your whole life ahead of you, so absolutely. Good, but needed more time. Fair enough. We'll give you more time as time comes to us. Fun and trusting unconscious more and more. Beautiful. Nate saying we don't have to do the work. Their own unconscious is all the work. We just guide them. Bingo. That's exactly it. That's exactly it, right? It takes all the pressure off us. We just have to know what to look for and where we know which buttons to press, if you will, right? Stephen, it provides the confidence needed to develop the skills. Exactly, right? No one's expecting you to be perfect at this after 3 days of training, but it gives you a roadmap on where to go and what to keep practicing or to keep training, right? In a moment, we're going to go and, oh, Thomas had a challenge on pinpointing, start answering the question. This is as a subject, is that right, Tom? If you have a question about that, feel free to come up. But if you have a problem, a difficulty answering those questions, that's exactly why those questions are there. They're essentially preparing your mind to be able to resolve the problem, right? And I think the ability to solve the problem is directly proportional to your ability to answer those questions. So lingering around those questions is a very important part of making your session work, if you will, right? If you want to say more about that, Tom, or if you have a question to ask about that, feel free to come on up and I'll have a chat with you about that. Otherwise, I'm happy to go towards a break as well. Harry's saying the metaphor part, what were we supposed to do with it? Right now, nothing. That's what the rest of the day is going to be about. Right now, we just want to, number one, find metaphors. And number two, know how to make the metaphor be meaningful for the client, for the subject, right? In terms of how to apply it, that's going to come after the break. What's missing for you and what do you notice is different are power questions. Yes, you can think of that. Exactly. Those are, I think, wonderful questions. Changing your focus from problem to solution. That's it, right? That is the key, right, to Erickson hypnosis, right? I'll tell you a story about that if there's some time later on today. And if you want to know the story, it's the African violent queen of Milwaukee, for those of you who know it. Who finds in this task? Of course, it's the unconscious, right? Okay, folks, so we're going to go into a break in a moment. And then after the break, and for the rest of today, we're going to basically spend all our time just applying what we've learned. We're applying the RPL protocol, revivify, pace, and lead. And then we're going to add metaphors in there. The metaphors are basically a either support or a replacement for the revivification process, right? But if you put them all together, RPLM, revivify, pace, lead, and metaphor. Metaphor is a style of leading, essentially, right? Then you have all the makings for a very powerful session that you can construct an infinite number of ways and have strong assurance that it will work reliably. Very often, nothing is, of course, 100%, because you know all the parts to it, and you'll know how to fix the parts that are missing. Does that make sense to you guys? So with a happy note, I'll let you have a nice break,